my name is Tanvi. I'm a rising senior at Scarsdale High School, and for my milestone, I was able to control both the robotic arm and the DC motors using flex sensors wirelessly. So this is how it works. So since my last milestone, I've also been able to control the robotic claw, and the base of the claw is able to rotate about 70% of the time using the flex sensors. So now I can control the robotic arm and the DC motors at the same time using the same code. So in order to do this, I had to have first two separate sets of code. One was the code that I had in my second milestone that allowed me to control the DC motors using the flex sensors wirelessly, and the other set of code was a code that would allow me to control the robotic arm using the flex sensors wirelessly. So to do that, first I had to take the code from my first milestone, which allowed me to control the robotic arm using the flex sensors from the same Arduino, and I split that code up in a similar way that I did for my second milestone for the motors, where one half of the code was the router code, which would take the readings of the flex sensors, and the other half was the coordinator code, which would read these readings and instruct the claw to either open or close, or the base to rotate 180 degrees to the right or left. So once I split up the code, I then assigned characters to certain, I assigned the XB to output certain characters when a certain flex sensor was bent for the router code, and then for the coordinator code, I also used a switch case again like I did in my second milestone, so that when the second XB read a certain character, it would tell the claw to either open or close, or the base to rotate to the left or right. So once I had these two separate sets of codes, I then had to combine them. So for that, I essentially just copied and pasted the router codes onto one code, and all I had to do was change the characters so that instead of A through D, I had A through H, so 8 separate characters for 8 separate hand gestures. And then for the coordinator code, I just copied and pasted both the coordinator codes into one, and also changed the characters accordingly. So once I did that, I essentially just had to troubleshoot so that the DC motors and the robotic arm would respond to the hand gestures I wanted it to. And at first they wouldn't, because my commands weren't specific enough. So for example, when I said that when flex sensor 1 is bent, send a character A, there were too many gestures for that to work properly, so I had to say that when flex sensor 1 is bent and flex sensor 2, 3, and 4 are straight, send the character A, and that ended up working. One problem I ran into was the claw on my robotic arm. The sensor had stopped responding, so I had to replace it with this one. And then so yeah, that was the main problem I ran into. And then for my final, final project, I plan on modifying and troubleshooting so that the robotic arm can bend all the way forwards rather than just slightly some of the time. And I'm also going to add an ultrasonic range sensor so that the car can tell how far it is from someone.